Hashem, today's Daf Yomi is Chullin Daf Kuf Yud Ches Chullin 118. We're going to start at the Gemara on the bottom of 117b, where the Gemara begins around 8 lines from the bottom. The Gemara is discussing two concepts. One is the concept that there's Tumas Ochlin and also Tumas Nevela. There's a food item which can become Tamei, and it can also transmit Tuma if it is the size of an egg. And then a food item can only make other food item tamei, food or liquid item tamei. But then there is also a carcass tuma. Carcass tuma becomes tuma if it's the size of an olive, and that can make even and it can become tamei even by carrying it, not just by touching, but also it can make a human being or a utensil tamei. Unlike food tuma, which can only make another liquid or another food item tamei. Separate from that, underlying concept is the discussion of our Gemara, which is about two things. One is called a shomer and one is called a yad. A shomer is something that protects the food item or protects the item in question. So, for example, an orange peel is a shomer to the orange. And our Mishnah had said that the shomer is mitzdaref, that it makes the food item, it's included to make it considered the size of an egg. And then in addition, that applies only to food tuma, but not to carcass tuma. And in addition to that, and in addition to that, there is what's called a yad. A yad is something that is a handle for the item, meaning to say like a bone without marrow for meat or for chicken, which helps you to hold the item. And so that is something that's machnas umotzi. It makes the item become tamei, and it can transmit the tuma from the item as well. If something touched the yad, or if the yad touched tuma, then it's able to be like a conduit, but it is not mitzdaref to the shiur. And the yad does apply to carcass tuma, unlike shomer. So actually, we're going to start. We did yesterday some of the Gemara here, so we're going to start 3 lines from the bottom, the last word on the line on 117b. The idea that a shomer is not mitzdaref, does not add up to the amount for severe tuma, for carcass tuma. What's the source for that idea? I mean, no, on Dutanu Rabbanan, it's learned out from the Brisa. Beniv wasa says the carcass can become tamei from its carcass, v'lo ba'or, and not the skin that's on it. The skin is a shomer for it. She'eino lav kazayis basar, unless it has our size amount of meat. On top of 118a, Yachol hanogea kinege basar me'achorav lo yeh tamei. I might think that if you touch the meat on the opposite side, i.e. by the skin, you'll not become tamei. Tamlomer yitma. So what you will become tamei. So on one hand, we said that if you touch the shomer is not mitzdaref, but on the other hand, we're saying you become tamei. So Maika Amar. So what is going on here? So 118a at the top. Amar Rava v'Amar Kadi Chisuri Mechsara. The Mishnah is the Brisa is missing some words. The Brisa has to be edited. This is how we should read it. B'niv wasa, the carcass becomes tamei. V'lo ba'or she'eino lav kazayis, but not the skin. V'or mashlimo l'kazayis, and the skin v'lo ba'or she'eino lav kazayis basar, but not the skin that there's not an outsized amount of meat on it. V'or mashlimo l'kazayis, but the skin does make it add up to an outsized amount. Yachol shani motzi af or sheyesh lav kazayis basar. I might think. So let me just read this properly. I didn't read it properly. So it says that this is how we amend the text. B'niv wasa, the carcass you become tamei if you touch it or you carry it. V'lo ba'or she'eino lav kazayis basar v'or mashlimo l'kazayis. The skin does not have the ability to add up to the meat and make it a kazayis. If you just touch the skin to make it a kazayis. Yachol shani motzi af or sheyesh lav kazayis basar hanogea kinege basar me'achorav. I might think that I'll also exclude the skin that the meat does have a kazayis basar, and if you touch the meat on the skin side, I might think you're not tamei. Va'afilu ma'isi yad. Even if you touch like a yad, something that's like a conduit or something to hold it, nami lo of it, that it won't make you tamei. Tamalomar yitma, meaning to say by a carcass you come tamei through the yad, through touching it, the meat through the yad, but not being mitzdarev to the shomer. So not including the amount of the shomer. Tanan hasam. So now we cite the Mishnah in Uks, in the first Mishnah in Uks, and it says Kol shu yad v'lo shomer. Anything that is a yad, like a handle, but not a protector, tamei u'mitamei, it can make the item itself tamei and also transmit the tumah outward. Ve'enu mitzdarf, but it's not joined together to include it to make the amount. Ve'enu mitzdarf. Shomer v'afal pi she'enu yad. So, but if it's a shomer, even though it's not a yad, so under those circumstances, like for example, the skin opposite the meat, you don't hold the skin in order to hold the meat, and so therefore it's a shomer, even though it's not a yad. So tameu mitzdaref. Then it is both tameu mitamei and it's also mitzdaref. Well, yad v'lo shomer. If it's neither yad nor a shomer, well mitamei v'lo mitamei. Then lo tamei v'lo mitamei. It's not doesn't transmit tumah, or it doesn't help the item become tamei or transmit it. So then the Gemara says yados heichik sive. Where is this concept of yados written in the Torah? Dersev, and the Gemara is going to cite three sources for it, three psukim. One is about feed items, how they become tamei. V'chitun mayim al zera v'nafal. If a seed gets liquid on it and then a carcass falls on it, tamehu lachem. It will become tamei for you. Lachem means for you, l'chol shebetzarchechem. Anything that you need in order to eat this. It means to say the rabos as a yados. So the yados can also transmit tumah. Miksiv, a second source, is about a carcass. If one of your animals will die, rabos as a yados. So that also achem includes yados. And then the third source, rabos yad lahachnes lahotzi. So this teaches us that the yad can be machnes umotzi tuma, shomer lahachnes uahotzi, and so that teaches us. So we have two psukim. One is by the nevela, one is by the seeds. That's teaching us that the yad can be both machnes tuma, can make the item itself tamei. It can be motzi, it can transmit the tuma outward. So shomer, the concept of a shomer, that lahachnes lahotzi lo tzarich kra. We don't need a pasuk to teach us that a shomer can be machnes umotzi. Why? Kal v'chomer miyad. It's learned out from the yad. Miyad asu ma yad, just like a yad she'ina magina, yad does not offer any protection to the item, meaning to say machnes umotzi, and yet it's able to bring in the tumah and take it out. Shomer lo kol shekain. So for sure, shomer can be machnes umotzi. So shomer, so shomer the kasav rachman olamoli. So why does the Torah tell us about shomer, that it can transmit tumah? Shema mina litzarif. So that teaches us that it's to be mitzarif, that it can add up to make it the size of an egg. So the Gemara asks the question: maybe yad can make the item tamei itself, but it cannot exclude. It cannot send it out. And shomer, maybe yad lahachnas lahotzi, and shomer lahachnas lahotzi, and then the shomer is telling us that it's machnas and motzi. Of a yad lahotzi, shomer litzarif lo. So, but maybe we can learn out that a yad could be motzi and a shomer could be mitzarif. So the Gemara says yad lahachnas lo lahotzi lo matzisamers. No, we can't say that the pasuk is teaching us the yad can become tamei and not exclude the tumah. Now we're not going to say hashi yulim miyale, since the yad functions to make the item take the item from a state of tahara to a state of tumah. Afuke mibaye. So for sure it can take, once it's already tamei, it can send it out. So therefore, it's clearly that the pasuk is telling us that it's yad lahachnes. Ve'ema, the Gemara says maybe not. Ema yad lahotzi v'lo lahachnes. Maybe the yad can only be motzi and not machnes, and shomer lahotzi lahachnes, and then the shomer can do both. Of a yad lahachnes, the shomer tzarif flow. So, but maybe the yad cannot be machnes, and the shomer is not mitzarif. So the Gemara says actually there's a third yad. Yad Yisera Ksiv, that there's a third yad that's written, and this is not by seeds. In addition to seeds, in addition to carcass, there's also pasuk by an oven becoming tamei, a clay oven. What does the pasuk say? It says anything that will fall upon this clay oven. Tanur v'kirayim yutatz tmeim heim utmeim yulachem. So you have to break this clay oven. It will be for you tamei lachem l'chol shebetzarchechem l'rabos asayados. So therefore, it's to include the yad in becoming tamei. So therefore we have hachnas lahotzi by yad and mitzdarif by a shomer. So Gemara says hay minayu miyater. So the Gemara assumes what are you talking about? We need all of them to teach us the idea of that the yad could be motzi, because, and why do you assume that we can have one to be machnis? They're all to teach us this idea of that a yad could be motzi. Says the Gemara, which one is extra that you can now darshan it to be machnis and mitzdarif by a shomer? Because we need all of them. Hai minayu liater, as the Gemara says. Which one of them is extra? Lichtov Rachmana Bizraim. Let's say you want to suggest that we write it only by seeds, v'leisu hanach minayu, and learn out the others from Zerayim. You can't learn it out because Mal Zerayim shekin tumas meruba. Zerayim is extra because you can't learn out the oven and the carcass from Zerayim because it has an extra feature, and that is that it can become tummy even not from a primary source of tumah, even from a vlad of tumah. Lichtov Rachmana B'tan, or let's say the Torah should write it by an oven and learn out carcass and seeds from the oven tumah. You can't say that. Why? The oven has its own feature that if the sheretz falls into the oven, it becomes tummy even in the airspace without even touching it. Learn it out from carcass. No. Nevela has its own features. One, it can make a person tamei. It's tamei even by carrying it, and it is intrinsically tamei, unlike the other items which have to become tamei. So so you can't learn out one from one. At least maybe learn out one from the other two. Gemara says, no, how can you do that? Hi, Tasi, how are you going to do it? Well, maybe you're not going to do it right. The Torah won't write it by Zerayim. And then the Zerayim will be learned out from carcass and oven. You can't do that. Why? You can't learn that out because the Zerayim has a feature that in order for it to be able to become tamei, first it needs liquid on it. Liquid, that's called hechsher tumah. The liquid needs to be put on it. One of 7 liquids. Yad shachatam. That's the acronym to remember. But that doesn't apply to the other items. So the Gemara says, wait 1 second. Rav Huna says it does. The Rav Huna, Breder Rav Yeshua, actually, Peiros Shelo Hochshur, the fruits that don't yet have the liquid on it, they weren't Hochshur Kabal Tumah. It's actually like a Tanur Shelo Nigmar Malachto Dami. That is comparable to an oven that is not yet completed, which is not yet capable of becoming tamei, but once it's completed, can become tamei. Versus still, we have a different question. You can't learn out the other two from the seeds because the Tomar Bezram Shemitamin El Benegia, that the carcass and the oven, they both can make something tamei without actually touching it. Carcass, you're carrying it, and the oven in the airspace by seeds, you have to touch it. So therefore, you can't learn out the other two from this. So, actually, Rashi, I didn't look at Rashi when I said that. It's just the coming from the other direction. The oven can become tamei just by being in the airspace, and the carcass can become tamei intrinsically, unlike the seeds which need to be touched. So then the Gemara says, well, or maybe don't write it by an oven, and then learn it out from the zeraim, the growth, the plant growths, and the vegetable growths, and the carcass. The Gemara says, no, you can't learn that out. Because the other items are food, and the oven is not food. or Torah should have write it by a carcass for Tesi Mehanach. And you actually could learn that out from the seeds and the oven. The Gemara says, you know what? Actually, that would have worked in a chinami, or some take that out. Think that Ella Yad didn't avail. So the question the Gemara is saying is that so in fact it doesn't need to write it by nevela, because we could have learned out nevela from so the Gemara says you're right, but actually you might have thought that you don't need to write it by nevela, but still the yad by nevela is extra. Why? So the Gemara says you're right. So the yad by nevela is not needed, and so therefore, if it's not needed by yad nevela, then so say it's to teach us yad the alma by other food items, and so since we don't need to learn it there, yad lahachnas, yad lahotzi, shomer l'tzar. So that's the extra one, and that's to teach us that yad can be both malchus and hotzi, and the shomers could be mitzaref. So the Gemara says, Vakati, but still, Yad Nevela Itzrach. No, it's not so simple. The Yad Nevela we do need. The low cost of Achmana ben Nevela, if the Torah didn't teach us Yad ben Nevela, Avamina, I would have said, Dayo Wavom and you can't go beyond the initial teaching. And the initial teaching was that a Yad can just be Motzi, not that it can be Machnis. And so therefore, and so the initial teaching is if you want to say you learn out the Yad Nevela from seeds and an oven, just like seeds cannot and an oven cannot be mitame a person. I would have thought. Hold on one second. So, and I might have thought that they can't make a person tummy because they're not avatuma. I might have thought that it wouldn't work. So therefore, we do need the yad nevela to teach us that it can still make, if it becomes tamei, it can still make a person tamei. And so therefore, what is it needed for? Yad nevela mitzvah tzarach, v'shomer nevela hudu tzarach. So the idea that a shomer for a nevela it cannot be mitzdaref, that was not needed to be written. Why did the Torah write us about tell us, as we said earlier from the pasuk of Yitma? Why do we need to know about a shomer dinavela? If you want to say it's to teach us that it can be mitzdaref, it's lo mitzdaref. We already said it's not mitzdaref. And to say that it can be motzi tuma kavachomer miyad us. We learned that already from miyad. Ella. So therefore, it must be. Hold on one second. So what's the reason why it's written? So it must be to teach us yad and avela, but we don't need the yad and avela. To teach us the yad in general, and so that's how we learn all these ideas. So Gemara says on top of maybe if it's not meant for the shomer and avela, maybe to teach us the law of shomer in general. Shomer la'achnes v'shomer l'tzaref. And a shomer can be machnes and be mitzaref. Of a yad la'achnes lo, but we still wouldn't know yad to be machnes. Ela mi kara. So the Gemara says that which we asked at the beginning, that we asked in the beginning that maybe yad is only able to be motzi and not to be machnes because it's a bigger chiddush to be machnes. Really, the whole yad was written about being machnes. If that we have to say that that's when it was written, as we're going to learn out, and we're going to learn out Yahutzah by Yad from a Kavachomer. So the Gemara says, if that's the case, Shomer dinavelu. So if we said that yad are able to be machnes umotzi. Then the pasuk Yitma, which is coming to teach us the shomer of an avela. Why do we need it? Since the pasuk is not needed, so what's it coming to teach us? L'gufe. It's coming to teach us about the nevela itself. U'amai ilu tzarufei amr slom mitzaref. It's not mitzaref. And ilu achnes u'hotzi kal chomer miyad asi. So what's it coming to teach us? First, it's not teaching us anything really. I mean, it's not teaching us anything we couldn't have learned on our own. Also, the asi v'kal v'chomer tarach v'kosav l'chras. Sometimes something which can be learned by a kal v'chomer, the pasuk comes and will still expound it. So the Gemara says, well, if that's the case, yihachi shomer da'alma. Well, the concept of a shomer in general, emo chala hachnis. So if that's the case, the shomer in general of other things which we learned out, I'll call zera zerua shayi zarea. Why don't we say emo chai could have said to you that lahachnis, and if that's the case, even the pasuk doesn't. We could have learned this out from a kav chomer from yados. So miltadasi b'kav chomer tarach b'kasav kra. We could have said that when we had questioned that, and we could have said that the pasuk wrote it, even though we could have learned that at kav chomer. So the Gemara says no. Midrash Dashina, where we can expound it, we do expound it sometimes. Achivi gives a different answer to that question. Achivi says shani shomer dinavela. The shomer of a carcass is different. Kiven to ma'isa yad ka'avid, because since the shomer nevela is considered like a yad because it's only malchus and motzi and it's not mitzdarif, so it's telling us the yitma is not needed for nevela. So therefore, given the ma'isa yad ka'avid, a yad shadinale. We stand it up law of yados by other food items to say it's similar to a yad, then it's more similar to a yad than a shomer. So the Gemara says that which we said earlier, that the law for the idea of a shomer being mitzdarif comes from the pasuk I'll call zera zerua asher yizareya. That this teaches us that the shomer is mitzdarif with the food items. And this teaches us that food items can become tamei just like they grow from the ground, which is in a shell. So if that's the case, now which we learned, the stem, the pitum of the pomegranate, mitzdarefes, can be mitzdaref like a shomer. The nates, and the nates is, nates, we know nates means sunrise. But really nates here, Rashi says, is another shomer on top of the pitum. Like we have on a gozim, it's a shomer agavi shomer. So the nates is a shomer on top of a shomer. Here it refers like the hair on top of the stem, on top of the pomegranate. So the Mishnah tells us, the Mishnah in Uktzin tells us, Hapitma shall rimon mitzdarefes, the nate shalo ein mitzdaref. The v'amai, why is the pitum able to be mitzdaref? Kari kana called zera zerua. V'leka, this is not something that grows from the ground like that. Furthermore, Vasil Haditnan, however, Barotev Akipa, Mitzdaref Otame Tumasochim. We know what's the source that these non-items that are growing from the ground, what's the source that they have a shomer? You can't learn that out from called Zera Zerua. Yeah, so what's the source? Zera Zerua Shari Zera Toharu. What can be the source? These are not things that grow from the ground. So Ella Tlasa Kroik CV. There are three psukim that are written about the seeds growing from the ground. I'll call zera zerua asher yizareya. Chad l'shomer Israel. One is to teach us the law of shomer by a zera. V'chad l'shomer dilonos. One is like a pomegranate, the stuff that grows from the tree. The shomer is mitzdaref. And idach l'shomer basar beitzim edam. The third is to teach us the law of a shomer by meat, flesh, and eggs. Meat, flesh, and eggs. Amar Rav Chia bar Ashi. Amar Rav yesh l'tuma yesh yad l'tuma ve'en yad l'hechsher. So Rav Chia bar Ashi says in the name of Rav that the concept of a yad, this handle, can be a conduit for tumah, but not to make this food item that grows from the ground huchshar, capable of contracting tumah. Whereas Rabbi Yochanan disagrees and he says yesh yad l'tumah ula hechshar. The yad could be a conduit to make something hechshar kabel tumah. What's the dispute between Rav and Rabbi Yochanan? B'mai can live for Same as svara, same makra. So one says it's logic, one says it's a verse. Same makra. The one says it's a verse. Marasav or mikra nidrash lefanav, v'olfnei lefanav. Marasav or nikra nidrash lefanav ulfnei lefanav. Meaning to say, it says v'chiyipol mi nivlasam, and so the pasuk that says that the midrash is expounded even with because it says v'chiyutan mayim at the beginning of the pasuk. That's even earlier, so that refers to a yad. So the one who says that it applies even to a yad for hechsher with kabel tama is going to say that that's the law of hechsher mashkemen. So therefore, it applies even to the yados. So the word lachem, according to Rabbi Yochanan, goes back all the way to v'chiyutan. Ribayis ema svara. It's logic. Marasavar hechsher tchilas tamahu. That Rabbi Yochanan is of the position that hechsher is the beginning of the tumah. Marasavar hechsher lav tchilas tamahu. But the hechsher is, whereas Rav says that hechsher is not the beginning of the tumah. And just to come back to that in one moment, Tanya Kavasi to Rabbi Yochanan, Kashem sheyesh yad l'tumah. Rabbi Yochanan said, just like there's a yad to make something tumah, there's also a yad to make something hechsher, capable of becoming tamei. And just like you can't contract tumah until it's removed from the ground, until it's removed from the ground, it can't be kabel the hechsher. When we were studying this last night with Max, he reminded me afterwards that Rav Soloveitchik says that there's maybe a machlokas whether or not there's a machlokas in Rav Yochanan whether there's hechsher for tumah, that where the yad can function as a hechsher for tumah, but there is this concept of a hechsher for tshuva, that hechsher for tshuva is already that once you start the process of repentance, like if a person says you'll be betrothed to me on the condition that I'm a tzaddik, even if he's a rasha, he's automatically betrothed to her, because we assume that the hechsher for tshuva is the beginning, it's a completely valid tshuva already. So maybe it's a question whether the Marasavar hechsher is the tchilas tama, and Rabbi Yochanan says it is, and Rav says it's not. But by tshuva, everybody says hechsher is tchilas tshuva, the beginning of tshuva. All right, we'll stop here. That was what Max said to me. Baruch Hashem, we'll stop here.